All right, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? If you guys can hear me, if you can just give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. Awesome, awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for making the time on a late afternoon here. I know you could be doing more fun things, but I really appreciate you coming out. I'll try to make this as entertaining and brief as possible, and I'll be happy to answer some questions at the end. What we're going to talk about is how we're trying to break down data styles at Sony Pictures. We're not there yet, but we're on our way, and so hopefully you guys can relate to your issues at your company as well. We'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here in the entertainment. I called it Moneyball in Hollywood. I'll talk a little bit more about what Moneyball is for those of you who are not familiar with it. Brief intro, I'll talk about how TV viewership or movie entertainment viewership is changing throughout the industry, as you probably are all very well aware of. How we're using data in entertainment, what Moneyball is, what opportunities we do have, and how to integrate Tableau. If you can't hear on your headset, you should all be on purple. I think yours is red, so yeah, purple. Yeah, the volume, is it too loud? I think it's a little loud, or if little loud, it's a little loud. So I think if you hold down the volume, is that right? There's a button on the left, I believe. If you hold it down, yeah, I think if you hold it down, supposedly it beeps and it goes down. Is that right, Andre? To adjust the volume? You hold it down and then you hear a beep, it goes down? Okay. And what I also did was I just kind of put it like half over my ear. Sometimes if it's a little too loud, so that's what I did. All right, so I think we're good? I think we're good? All right, great, thanks. You're good? Okay. All right, and then we'll talk. That one doesn't work? Is it really? Okay. And then we'll get into what we actually did using some Tableau dashboards on how to, what we did on some dashboards, so we'll show you what we exactly did. Okay. A brief intro about myself. They asked me to throw this in. Born and raised in LA. For those of you who are not familiar, Hollywood used to be called Hollywood Land. That was the whole sign, right? In 1923 is when it was erected. It deteriorated, they got rid of land, and now it's just called the Hollywood sign. I went to Occidental College. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. Our most recent claim to fame is Obama went there for 2 years, then he transferred to Columbia, but we still claim him as one of our alumni. So I studied math and physics there. That's kind of my background. Then I actually went to go work in the rocket science industry, working in aerospace engineering. Actually, I'll date myself a little bit here. I was using S+ before R became good. So I was using S+ actually paying for it. And then we were trying to predict when satellites would fail, what are the probabilities of some missiles bombing, and all the good classified stuff that I used to work on, which was really neat. And then I decided, what do I want to do with my career? I said, oh, let me go get an MBA. So I went to go get an MBA at UCLA, big Bruin fan, and so go Bruins. And then I got a job over at DirecTV. So I was heading up an analytics team. They were just heading it up. I built a team from about 2 to about 25. And we're trying to measure customer experience. What are our customers experiencing on the satellite side, as well as in the latter years on the streaming side? How is DirecTV now? How can we improve that performance for our customers to make sure that they keep paying a lot of money for our services? So that's what we were doing at DirecTV. Then I joined Sony Pictures about a year and a half ago, and I started using Tableau probably only for about a year. So I've been hacking away. I bet you there are many of you out there who are much better than I am, but we're all in this together trying to learn and stumble together. So how is entertainment viewership, TV viewership, movie viewership, how is it changing, right? Who knows what movie this is from? Field of Dreams, 1989, right? And the famous line from that movie is, if you build it, he will come, right? Shoeless Joe Jackson, Field of Dreams, 89. If you build it, he will come, right? It's a very famous line. What we found, though, in the entertainment industry is that even if we make a good movie, people may still not come. That is kind of our challenge that we're battling with right now. And so, as this data plot shows, and I apologize that it's in Excel, I didn't do it in Tableau, my apologies. So, as you can see here, right, last year, 2017, we had a 15-year decline in attendance in movies, right? So a very steep decline, right? Lowest since 1992. On the good news is that this year we're on track, right? Our attendance has gone up, so admissions has gone way up. And as you may or may not know, our total box office revenue is still doing pretty well, because I'm sure those of you who go to movies, we charge an arm and a leg for your movies, right? So we charge, you can't get the $5 movies anymore, right? It's almost with the IMAX, you name it, right? You name it, 20 bucks, right? But thank you for supporting us. We really appreciate it. You guys are giving us a job. Obviously this year we've had some really good movies, not only on the Disney side, but also on the Sony side. 2019 is actually looking to be even more promising. Just Disney themselves they got all kinds of movies in store, Toy Story, you name it, right? They're all coming out. And we've got some big ones coming out as well from the Sony side, Jumanji 2, etc., and another Spider-Man, of course. Okay. Just a quick plug on Sony. Anyone watch Spider-Man 2017? Anyone watch Spider-Man? Anyone watch Jumanji? This is our highest grossing movie now in Sony history, right? Anyone watch Baby Driver? Baby Driver was a really unique, I thought that was a really cool movie as well. So thank you guys. So we actually, even though attendance went down in 2017 overall, for Sony it was one of our better years for sure. Okay. And just another quick plug. Anyone watch Equalizer 2 yet for this year? Okay, it's actually done pretty well. Our big hot one right now. Anyone seen Venom? Anyone seen Venom? Okay, it's actually doing really well right now. We hit the $100 million marker as well. Okay, and then our big one coming out for this winter is going to be an animation with Spider-Man, kind of a multi-universe version of Spider-Man. Okay. But how is TV viewership changing amongst all of us, right? As we know, right, people are cutting the cord. Any cord cutters out here? Cord cutters? Myself included. Well, one of the perks that we had at DirecTV is we got everything, right? The NFL Network, HBO. Once I left, I cut the cord as well, right? And so, but about 33 million households are expected to cut the cord by the end of 2017. That's quite a few. At the peak, we had about 120 million households that had some kind of cable TV. So basically about a third of the households have cut the cord. According to a Nielsen report though, on average, each adult subscribes to about 3.1 services per household, right? How many Netflix users? How many of you share Netflix accounts? Okay. Right, Hulu, Amazon, right? We have, you name it, right? So on average, right, we have about 3.1. So that seems to be correct even with this audience here. And TV viewership or streaming viewership actually has not gone down. It's only gone up, right? So on average, right, we're up to about 6 hours per day on our phones doing something, right? Which is a significant number. So the challenge is that the viewership is not going down per se. It's just that they're watching it where they want, what they want, whenever they want. So it's a challenge for us on our end to try to meet that demand. Okay? So how are we using this data in entertainment, in our industry, right? Back in the day, right, we had very distinct windows as to when content was being released, right? We started in the theater, right? Then about 2 months later, it would go to the airplanes, it would go to the hotels, right? About 3 months after release, 90 days or so, it would go into the home entertainment, the DVD market as well. Then about 6 months after theatrical release, it would go to our premium content, right? Our HBOs, our Showtime, our Stars. And then about 2 to 9 years after release, it would go to some of these other cable networks, right? And then lastly, about 10 years after release, this is when it would hit over-the-air networks, right? It would hit our ABC, NBCs, and you name it. But as we're seeing now is that these content windows are definitely blurring, right? As Netflix has definitely been an industry interrupter, right? Things are going straight to DVD, things are going straight to streaming, as you all know. So there is challenges now where we can't be as siloed as we once were. Okay? I'm sure we all have this challenge here in our industry and in all our industries, just throughout the workplace, is how do we deal with silos, right? Especially if as companies acquire or you get acquired, you have your legacy systems and you're trying to integrate with the company that bought you out or that you bought. I mean, we're having trouble just even with our own stuff. You imagine when you're trying to integrate someone else's data, right? And so we know that this is not uncommon, right? And we know that data silos, we know it's terrible. We're all guilty of it to a certain extent, right? We all have our own data hoarding capabilities, right? Whether it be on our Excel spreadsheet or whatnot. But it's a lot of storage and very minimal action. Okay? Here's an example that I know is true throughout all my work in the industry is, imagine this, right? Imagine you had a company, you have your finance group, you have your operations group, you have your marketing group. So someone asks for, hey, I want an industry report, okay? Pretty common. You go buy a third-party industry report. What you don't realize is that these other groups, right, probably are ordering the same industry report over and over. And there might be some sales vendors out here. You guys are doing a hell of a job selling us the same thing over and over, but you guys are meeting your quotas. It's our fault for having these silos at our companies, right? And it gets worse, right? Let's say you're on the same building, and the guy above you or the guy next to you, they're probably ordering the same thing over and over, right? It's not uncommon, and it's amazing how much inefficiency and cost there that we are accumulating because we don't communicate, right? But this is just obviously kind of a blatant example, but we know it exists everywhere, okay? But with these data challenges, with these data silos, there is definitely an opportunity, and we're calling it the Moneyball opportunity, right? So for those of you who are not familiar with Moneyball, anyone read the book, 2003 Moneyball? Okay, we got some, it's a great book, great read. For those of you who don't know, I'll give you a quick summary. It was written in 2003 by Michael Lewis. It's based on, right, the Oakland A's, right? Small market baseball team in Oakland. They had to find a way to compete with the bigger market teams, right, such as the Yankees, the Red Sox, and now the Dodgers. And they found a way to be very successful by drafting really good players, right? And of course, if you have a good book, right, you got to make a good movie. So anyone watch the movie? You know, a lot of people. So it actually did really well. It was a Sony movie released in 2011. It grossed a little over $110 million worldwide, right? With Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. And so here's a little quick depiction of what was in that movie, right? We had kind of the old school. You got your old school scouts, right? Who kind of have been around the game a lot. They know the players. They know the coaches. And I love this one here. This is from 1954. Sandy Koufax, right? Famous Brooklyn Dodger pitcher. I love these gradings, right? A-, A-, which are great grades. But imagine if a different scout, is that scout's A- different than this other scout's B+? You can see how it becomes very subjective, right? So that was the old school way. And the new school way is you basically have a lot of data, right? But you can be very, very objective about it, right? You just let the data speak for itself. So now you're looking at the spin rate on curveballs, right? You're looking at how someone bats against lefties and righties. How does someone play against day games versus night games, artificial turf versus grass, you name it. They're looking at all different kinds of combinations, right? One of the big things now with the World Series, we got two kind of analytic teams. The big thing is they don't want the starting pitcher to face the lineup for the third time in a row, so they're always going to the bullpen over and over, right? So that's all based on analytics. Okay. An example, kind of an old school example of what used to happen in the entertainment industry was you would have kind of a big shot, you know, executive. You have a hot shot director walks in, he just says, hey, I'm going to have so-and-so in my movie. It's going to cost about this much. And based on that relationship, right, they walk out, you get $100 million, boom, you go make your movie, right? Kind of the new school way, the Moneyball way, is now it's become a much more collaborative where you're actually looking at how is this movie going to do, not only in the theaters, how is it going to do with DVD sales? How is it going to do in the TV industry, the TV window? How is it going to do streaming-wise? Are there going to be any merchandise sales that we can possibly get out of this as well? So you can see all these different opportunities that we're trying to vet. We still don't get it perfect, just like any forecast, but we're definitely trying to vet this a lot better, using a much more collaborative effort rather than just one guy's hunch or one guy's gut, right? So this is how we're trying to apply a more analytic approach in our industry. So this last section here, we're going to talk a little bit about what we did here at Sony. I'll show you some snapshots of some dashboards that we created. So this is kind of what we're calling a Title 360 for our attempt to bring our data together, right? So we had these kind of distinct windows in our industry. As these industries are coming together, we're trying to find ways, can we collaborate, can we share our data a little bit better? So we created this dashboard here, and I'll just kind of highlight a few of the things that we're doing here. So one of the things is, like the last talk, if anyone was here for that, there's this idea of a URL action, right? You can just create a picture, an image, you just click on it, and it just takes you directly to that link. So it's a pretty cool feature for Tableau dashboards. Another thing here is kind of a URI thing where you insert an image and you can set your URL so it directly hooks up with your email and you can get an email sent directly from your dashboard. That's a pretty neat feature as well. One other thing we added here was this timestamp feature. So as we refresh our data, it tells you exactly when the data was last refreshed, which is kind of useful, especially with box office data as it changes on a daily basis. And lastly, it was kind of a trick that I struggled with when I first started messing with Tableau. Was I initially had like these floating in, or these boxes in between each one, and it was just trying to size it was a challenge, right? And so what I found was if I just set these outer padding to a certain size, in this case I used 20, what it does is it actually just spaces these out equally. So when I add another image or add another box, I don't have to manually go through and change them all as much. So this is actually a little trick I learned kind of by trial and error. One other thing that I want to talk about is just this whole idea of a title, a glossary. It was just something which I thought was useful, is having common definitions. Kind of falls along with the idea of data governance. Having the same definitions all in one place so people can know where did the data actually come from, can I trust it? So trying to actually get it into one place was a little bit of a challenge, as we had to work with legal to make sure can this be shared. But being able to review the agreements and being able to put it all in one place has been really useful, because it's amazing how someone defines box office could be different from what someone else defines as box office as well. So this has been a pretty useful exercise for us as well. One of the things that we did for a Tableau perspective is the idea of adding column, just making a table. What we noticed was you'd get this ABC column on the far right, and I was trying all these different things to try to get rid of it. I was like, how do I get rid of this? You go on the community, you try different things. So what I did was I created this blank field here, right? And then you just got to create it by putting it right in between quotes. And then you drop it in the text box over on the mark side, and then what it does is it gets rid of it pretty nicely. To get rid of some of these gray lines here though, right, you just have to go up to the column divider and then you just set it to none and none, and then those gray lines go away. Another thing is if you want to get this alternate gray, white kind of shading, is you just have to go in and play around with the band size here, and then if you set your level all the way to the left, it'll do every other. If you shift this level further to the right, it'll do like 2 or 3 rows, right? So just another little trick you can play around with as you build your dashboards. Okay. This dashboard is probably the one that's used the most right now, because what we've done is we've integrated kind of our motion picture data here on the left, and then here we kind of have our home entertainment. Previously, what groups had to do was if someone from motion pictures wanted to hear about data from home entertainment, they'd have to send an email to someone that they knew and then ask them for, hey, can you do me a favor and run a business objects report for me, right? So you had to go through that clunky process. Now you can just go to one dashboard, the data is being refreshed, you can just get it here, and then you can just save so much more time, and it's much more efficient. Everyone's on the same page, everyone's using the same data, okay? So we have our filters. I'm sure everyone would use the dashboards. They're familiar with the filters and all the different aspects here. All right. One thing we also ran into was there's so many different data fields. We ran into just a real estate issue, right? How many columns can you actually fit? This is obviously not the prettiest dashboard, but we're just trying to get the data out there for people to share within Sony Pictures. And sometimes the default is 6, right? So if you end up adding 7 columns, that first one gets deleted. So what you can do is you can go to analysis, table layout, and then you can change it up to 16. I believe the newer version is even greater, right? But just a little tool to expand your column headers. Okay. One thing that we also learned was if you want to link certain local files, so in this case we're showing certain data here, but if you want to show all the different metadata, which we do have, we're using Alteryx, and then we're spitting it out into an Excel file as well. So if you want to get all the metadata, you can just create a little icon, once again a URL link, But one thing to note is it cannot point to a shared network. On your desktop, it'll work fine on a shared network, but as soon as you publish it, at least for us, we ran into the issue where you cannot go to it. It had to go to a URL. So just something to keep in mind if you end up doing that. Okay. One thing also for the sorting function, sometimes these little icons come out, right? And you can only sort by the leftmost dimension. So even if these icons come out, I don't know if the newer version, if they got rid of that, but that's something here. You can go to filters to clear that, but you can actually only sort by the leftmost column. Okay. This one here is something that people had asked for was, wouldn't it be great to have all the talent data in one place? Because previously people were going to IMDb or Box Office Mojo and doing manual multiple searches on who's in what movie, writing down how much they made a certain movie. They'd cut and paste that stuff into a spreadsheet, right, and then having to update that every time a new movie came out. And so what we did here was we put it all into one place. So in this case, let's say if we wanted to search for movies that Denzel Washington has starred in, and you can see here, right, it's already sorting. Denzel Washington shows up in all these movies here, right? We can see what years we want. In this case, we just went back about 10, 11 years. And if you add this apply button, it makes your dashboard work a lot more quicker. Otherwise, if you just click 1 year, it recalculates. You click another year, it recalculates. You can select all your filters up front, and then you just hit the apply button, and it just does it once. It makes it a lot more efficient. Okay. One other thing we added was this grand total column here on the top, so that you can do a sum, you can do an average. In this case, we did an average, and it does the aggregate measures. So you have in one place. In this case, you can see for Denzel Washington, his domestic box office earning potential on average has been about $80 million, which is a pretty useful calculation to have, especially if you go into negotiations, right? So this data is all up in one place. It gets refreshed as soon as the box office data gets refreshed as well. Okay. This dashboard was a little tricky one here, and this one was, it looks simple, right? It's just a dual axes. We're looking at weekly box office transactions. And so one of the things that we had to do is we actually had to do a data blend of two different data sources. And actually, it's the same data source. I had to do a duplicate, and I had to call a primary and a secondary. And you can see by the blue and the orange, it's actually very important what you call your primary and what you call your secondary. It's kind of by trial and error we figured this out. And then you got to blend it, and you'll see this little red chain link, right? When the red light is linked, that means is lit. That means you know the data is linked and it's working. And then up on the top here, right, you have your two variables for your dual axes, and you can right-click on the second one here to get your axis. I deleted the axes here because it was the same as the left, but you can see what we've done here to show how Spider-Man, in this case, how Spider-Man is compared to your average of your comparative titles. In this case, we picked Spider-Man 1 and 2 as my comparative titles. There's this option called the dynamic filter, which is a really cool tool where you can actually go in, and as I pick a different title here, if I pick Jumanji and I pick Jumanji here, it'll show up here. Instead of just showing title 1, you can make it dynamic, which makes it a lot more user-friendly as well. Okay. And so one of the things that I've learned just trying to hack through this, right, as I've been working on this for about a year, I definitely reached out to some of my colleagues, and some of them are here, right, and I really thank them for being here. One guy back there I have to shout out is Nilesh. He's been kind of our back-end guy. He takes care of all the data refreshes. I don't know if Vastu's here. He was our big guy from day one working with us on this. The community forum is huge, right? I go on there, search for things like, how do I do a data blend, right? You just go in there, and there's a lot of great resources there as well. I can't thank the Tableau community support team enough, like Helen, Adrian, Keith is over here. Keith's been my right-hand man. He's the one to help me with the data blend as well as a bunch of other stuff. These guys have been super responsive and super helpful. Kyle up in Seattle, just sit down and just scheduled like an office hour with him. And then we just went through to do that. He's very helpful. And last but certainly not least, right, don't be afraid to do trial and error. That's the only way I learn, right? Just hack away. And that's the way you're going to get better, okay? And so for my last slide here, right, the whole idea is we want to get away from just the idea of having the quantity of data. You got to be able to draw some insights and get some understanding out of it. Once you have that understanding, then you can make some decisions off of it, right? In our case, we're still actually trying to get our data in one place, trying to work on getting people to share their data. It's a community, it's a culture change. It changes slow. We know that it happens, but we're making progress, right? And as we can show value of breaking down these silos to share our data, we're going to get more buy-in from our senior executives as well. So some of the actions that you could take based on some of these examples that we talked about today: budgeting and forecasting, very obvious, right? How many of you have been in a budget meeting or a planning meeting where they say, how much should we increase our forecast, right? And they just kind of guess around. They said, how does 5% sound? And everyone said, oh, 5% sounds great. So what they do, they just bump up their projection by 5%. It's like, what thought went into that besides just a lazy 5 sounds great, 10 sounds great, right? Let's just throw it in there. How about if we actually use some of our historical data to look at any kind of seasonality, to see what kind of improvements we can actually make in our prediction? One of the things I think people are afraid of is making a prediction because it's going to be wrong. You're going to be wrong half the time anyway. Go ahead and put a number out there, right? Go ahead, take a chance, right? Take a chance, get something started, but base it on some data rather than only your gut feel. Now, if you have a lot of experience in your industry, you can use that to your advantage, right? As you have a feel for how things go, and then you can apply that with data. That becomes a powerful combination. We talked about green lighting, and I'm sure everyone has green lighting in your industry. Is it a go, no go on this project? Should we invest in this new software or whatnot? Right? Use data. Use data to make some predictions. Use data to actually make a good decision. Marketing and advertising, right? Very common application in this day and age. How many of us are in this industry where we just do this spray and pray email blast and we hope, wow, we got a 2% hit rate? I mean, come on, right? We can become much more targeted in our approach as we know what consumers like. What do they watch? What do they buy stuff, right? Do they have a family? What zip code do they live in? There's so many opportunities here where we can apply much more targeted marketing and advertising. And lastly, with sales and negotiation, right? If we know how much Denzel Washington is worth, is he trending downwards? Is he getting too old? Is someone up and coming, right? There's opportunities where we can use that data to make much more. It gives us power in our negotiations, right? And same for you in whatever industry that you're in. With that data, right, you can definitely make some applications to make better decisions. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for making the time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. Thank you so much.